Humiliating a 40-year-old Apache woman with no children, the cowboy declared, "I already have my own." She had lived in the same small village for all her 40 years. The houses were simple, made of sun-baked clay and wood, and the roads were more paths than streets. The mountains rose around the village like silent guardians, and the river ran past it like a silver ribbon, giving life to the land and the people who depended on it. From the outside, the village seemed quiet and peaceful, but inside it carried its own stories of joys, struggles, and traditions that shaped every life. The woman, known to everyone simply as Naya, had grown up in this village. Her childhood had been filled with the kind of warmth that comes from small communities where everyone knows each other's stories. She remembered playing near the river with her cousins, learning to weave baskets from reeds, and listening to her grandmother's stories by the fire. Those stories told of bravery, love, loss, and the spirits that watched over their people. They shaped Naya's understanding of the world, how to be strong, patient, and respectful. Even as a child, she had shown a quiet determination. While other children ran freely and shouted in play, she often preferred to sit by the river, watching the water and thinking about the world around her. She learned early that strength was not always loud, and courage was not always about action. Sometimes it was about enduring, about standing firm even when no one noticed, and about carrying responsibilities without complaint. Life had not been easy for her family. Her parents had worked tirelessly to provide for their home. Her father, a skilled craftsman, spent long hours making tools and repairing roofs, while her mother tended the small garden behind their house, grew herbs, and cared for the animals. Naya helped in whatever way she could, from carrying water from the river to tending the chickens. Her hands were strong, calloused from work, but they were also gentle, able to soothe a crying child or mend a torn garment with patience. As she grew older, Naya noticed that the world around her placed certain expectations on women. Many believed that a woman's life was complete only if she had children. Every festival, every gathering seemed to echo that belief. When she turned 20, she began to feel the weight of it. Questions came quietly at first. "When will you marry?" someone would ask. "When will you have children?" others would whisper. At first, she brushed it off. But over time, the words settled into her mind like dust in the corners of a room. Naya had dreams, but they were not the dreams that others expected. She wanted to travel to nearby towns, learn new crafts, and help preserve the traditions of her people. She wanted to teach young children about the stories of her ancestors and the ways of the land. She wanted to live a life that had meaning beyond the simple measure of raising a family. But she also knew that following these dreams meant she would often stand apart from others, and that the village might judge her. Her days were filled with routine, but each task carried its own significance. In the mornings, she would rise before the sun, feeling the chill of the mountain air. She would fetch water from the river, careful not to slip on the stones, and carry it back to her home in large clay jars. The river was more than just water. It was a teacher. She would watch the currents and notice the patterns of birds, fish, and clouds. It taught her patience, observation, and the importance of timing. After bringing water home, she would prepare a simple breakfast for herself. Most days it was cornmeal porridge, sometimes with berries from the bushes nearby. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, thinking about the work ahead. Then she would check on the small garden, pulling weeds and tending the plants. Her hands, though strong, moved carefully so as not to harm the delicate shoots. Every plant that survived felt like a small victory, a reminder that care and effort could yield life even in challenging conditions. Despite her busy days, Naya never neglected her learning. She loved books, though they were rare in the village. She would borrow them from travelers or from the small collection kept by the elder woman who lived at the edge of town. She read about history, nature, and stories of people who had faced challenges and overcome them. Each story inspired her and strengthened her belief that life was more than what others expected it to be. Her evenings were often quiet, spent sitting by the fire with her mother or grandmother. They would share stories, sometimes about the past, sometimes about dreams for the future. Her grandmother, in particular, had a way of speaking that made even the simplest tale feel like a lesson in courage. "Naya," she would say, "you do not need to measure your worth by what others demand. Your strength is in your heart, in your hands, and in the life you create for yourself." These words stayed with Naya, becoming a shield against the quiet judgments of the world. Even so, the whispers of the village could be hard to ignore. At festivals, she would hear women talking about the joys of motherhood and men discussing family legacies. She would smile politely, but inside, a quiet ache settled. She sometimes wondered if she would ever be fully accepted, or if she would always be seen as incomplete because she had no children. Yet she also knew that she had contributed in ways that mattered, helping neighbors, caring for the sick, preserving traditions, and offering wisdom to those who sought it. Naya's inner life was rich. She found beauty in small things. The way sunlight touched the mountain peaks at dawn, the laughter of children playing near the river, the scent of herbs drying in the wind, and the quiet hum of the night. She often walked alone under the stars, feeling the vastness of the sky and the permanence of the land beneath her feet. These moments reminded her that life had depth beyond what society measured, and that her existence had meaning even if others could not see it. She had friends, though few, who understood her. They respected her independence and admired her knowledge. Together, they would discuss plants, stories, and crafts, sharing laughter and lessons. These friendships gave her a sense of belonging and helped her see that the world was bigger than the small judgments of the village. She learned to find joy and validation within herself rather than seeking it solely from others. But life was not without its struggles. Sometimes loneliness pressed upon her, especially in moments when the village seemed to value only family and children. She longed for understanding, for someone to see her fully beyond societal expectations. There were nights when she cried quietly, not from weakness, but from the weight of being misunderstood. And yet, every morning, she rose again, facing the world with quiet determination and resilience. Naya had learned many lessons from the years she had lived. She knew that life could be harsh and judgmental, but she also knew that it could be beautiful and full of meaning if one looked carefully. Her strength was not loud, but it was steady. Her courage was not in grand gestures, but in the small, daily acts of living fully, caring for others, and staying true to herself. By the time she reached 40, Naya had become a figure of quiet respect. The younger women in the village sometimes sought her advice, and the elders appreciated her dedication to tradition. Yet, even with respect, she felt the persistent shadow of societal expectations. People noticed what she had not done, what she had not had, more than what she had achieved. And still, she continued her life, carrying her dignity like armor, knowing that worth was measured not by the narrow standards of others, but by the strength, wisdom, and compassion she brought into the world. As she sat by the river one evening, watching the water reflect the fading light, Naya thought about the years behind her and the years ahead. She felt a deep connection to the land, her ancestors, and the small community she loved. She knew that challenges would come, that there would be moments of judgment and misunderstanding, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. Her life, rich with experience, care, and knowledge, was hers to live fully, regardless of what others thought. And so Naya lived, quietly, boldly, and with purpose. She walked her own path, not defined by children, wealth, or recognition, but by the life she nurtured in every small act of courage, every moment of patience, and every choice to remain true to herself. In her quiet strength, there was a story waiting to be told, one that the world might not always hear, but one that mattered deeply, both to her and to those whose lives she touched. Life in the village continued its quiet rhythm, but change was in the air. Naya went about her days, carrying water, tending her garden and helping neighbors just as she always had. Yet, there was a subtle shift. Travelers and traders often passed through the village, bringing with them news from distant towns, small luxuries, and sometimes strangers who caught the eye of the people. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, a rider appeared on the main path. The man was tall and confident, dressed in clothes unfamiliar to the villagers. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face, boots that had clearly traveled many miles, and a leather coat that creaked with movement. His horse was strong and well-fed, moving steadily along the uneven path. Villagers paused to watch, curious about this outsider who seemed so different from anyone they had seen before. Naya was nearby, carrying a basket of vegetables to the market. She noticed him, but unlike some villagers, she did not stop to stare. She had learned long ago to observe without judgment, to notice details without letting curiosity distract her from her tasks. Still, something about the man's presence stirred a quiet curiosity within her. He was different, not rude, not careless, but confident in a way that suggested he had lived beyond the mountains and rivers that bounded her world. The cowboy, as he would come to be called, dismounted at the edge of the village. He spoke briefly with the innkeeper, asking for lodging and information about the surrounding area. His voice was firm but not unkind, and though he carried the air of someone used to giving orders, there was also a hint of curiosity in his tone. People whispered as he passed, noting the way he looked at everything with careful eyes, as if he were cataloging the world around him. Naya continued on her way but could not help noticing that he paused near the river, where children were playing and women were washing clothes. He seemed to watch, not to intrude, but with an interest that was different from mere sightseeing. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her uneasy and curious at the same time. She had met strangers before, of course, but there was something about this man that felt like he might change the quiet life of the village in ways no one could predict. Over the next few days, the cowboy appeared at various places in the village. He visited the market, speaking to merchants and travelers, asking questions about local customs, the land, and the history of the people. His presence began to stir conversation among the villagers. Some admired him for his boldness, while others frowned, unsure of his intentions. Naya watched these developments quietly, maintaining her routine but paying attention. She had learned from experience that outsiders could bring both opportunity and trouble. Their first direct encounter happened by chance. Naya was carrying water from the river when the cowboy approached, leading his horse carefully along the path. The horse stumbled slightly on the stones, and without thinking, Naya stepped forward to help. "Be careful," she said, steadying the reins. The cowboy looked down at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He was used to handling animals himself and rarely needed assistance, yet there was a gratitude in his gaze that was unmistakable. "Thank you," he said. His voice was calm, almost measured, as though he chose his words carefully. "I'm not used to asking for help. I notice things," Naya replied simply, moving the horse so it stood steady. "Sometimes help is better than pride." He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging a truth he had not considered. For a moment, the river, the stones, and the evening sky seemed to hold them in quiet attention. Then he adjusted the horse's bridle and moved on, leaving Naya to finish her task. Though the encounter was brief, it left an impression on both of them. He had seen her skill and composure. She had noticed his quiet confidence and unfamiliar ways. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often. The cowboy asked questions about the village, the people, and the land. He watched her as she worked, not intrusively, but with an interest that made her aware of his presence. At times, he would speak to her directly, asking about the plants she tended, the river's flow, or the best paths through the mountains. Naya answered politely, keeping her distance while offering knowledge. She did not trust easily, and strangers often brought trouble, but she also had a curiosity that matched his. The villagers began to notice a subtle tension in these interactions. Some whispered that Naya was giving him too much attention, though in truth she was cautious and measured. The cowboy's interest in her work and her knowledge made him stand out from the other visitors. He seemed to respect her skills, even if he did not fully understand her life. For Naya, the attention was unusual. She was not used to being acknowledged for her abilities, only judged for what she lacked. Yet she felt a small spark of pride in being seen as capable, competent, and wise. One day he approached her as she tended the garden. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and the smell of earth filled the air. "You know a lot about this land," he said, watching her hands move skillfully among the plants. "Most people wouldn't notice half of what you do." Naya paused, wiping her hands on her skirt. "I pay attention," she said. "The land tells you things if you listen. You only have to care enough to hear it." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing more than her words. "I suppose that's true," he said. "I've traveled a long way, but I don't always see what's right in front of me." There was a pause, filled only by the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of the river. Naya felt a strange mixture of caution and curiosity. She had learned to protect herself and her life's work, but there was something about this man that made her wonder if he might understand more than she expected. Yet, she reminded herself to remain careful. Words and appearances could be misleading, and she had seen many people come and go without leaving any lasting mark. As the days passed, the cowboy continued to engage with the villagers and with Naya. He learned small details about the river's path, the crops, and the traditions of the people. Naya, in turn, observed him closely. She noticed his pride, the way he carried himself as if the world had shaped him into someone who knew his worth, yet also a curiosity that suggested he was still learning. There was a tension in him, confidence mixed with restlessness, that she found intriguing, though she would not admit it openly. One afternoon, a small problem arose in the village. A wagon wheel broke while crossing the rocky path near the river. The cowboy rushed to help, using skill and strength to lift and repair the wheel. Naya watched, impressed by his hands-on approach. He worked efficiently, yet carefully, and though he didn't ask for help, he accepted her advice when she suggested a small adjustment. This collaboration, simple as it was, created an unspoken bond between them. They were two people from very different worlds, yet for a brief moment, they worked together as equals. Despite this connection, there were moments that reminded Naya of the divide between them. The cowboy sometimes spoke in ways that assumed family and children defined a person's life, casually mentioning his own experiences and what he valued. Naya would listen politely, sometimes offering a neutral comment, other times simply smiling without response. Inside, she felt the old ache of judgment that had followed her for years. She had learned to hide it well, but it lingered nonetheless. Through all this, Naya began to realize that the cowboy's presence was changing something within her. She noticed more details, thought more critically about her own life, and reflected on what truly mattered to her. She realized that the attention of a stranger, even one who seemed confident and worldly, could stir old fears and longings, but it could also offer a chance to see her own worth more clearly. She began to understand that her life had meaning independent of the opinions of others, even if those opinions were voiced in polite conversation. As part 2 came to a close, the village had begun to accept the cowboy's presence, though not without murmurs of curiosity and concern. Naya had met him several times now, and while she remained cautious, she could not deny the impact his arrival had on her life. He had disrupted the quiet rhythms of the village, challenged assumptions, and created a subtle tension that hinted at deeper conflicts to come. For Naya, it was a time of reflection, awareness, and quiet preparation, as she began to wonder what this stranger's place in her life might ultimately mean. And so, the stage was set. The cowboy was here, the village had noticed him, and Naya's steady, patient life had begun to intersect with a force unfamiliar, yet impossible to ignore. What came next would test her resilience, her understanding of people, and her ability to remain true to herself in the face of curiosity, judgment, and unexpected encounters. The sun was high that day, bright and warm, casting golden light over the village. Naya was busy at the market, arranging her herbs and woven baskets as she did every morning. The air smelled of fresh bread, dried herbs, and the earthy scent of the river nearby. Villagers moved about, greeting neighbors, haggling with merchants, and exchanging the usual chatter of daily life. For Naya, it was just another day, filled with familiar tasks, until the cowboy appeared. He walked through the market with his usual confidence, his boots clicking on the wooden planks, his hat shading his eyes. He had learned enough of the village routines to know where to go, and today he approached the center of the market, where people often gathered to speak. Naya noticed him at once, instinctively straightening her posture, not out of pride, but out of the awareness that his attention often brought unexpected outcomes. The crowd parted slightly as he moved forward, and Naya sensed that the villagers were curious, perhaps even anxious. She had seen the way they watched him, the mixture of admiration and suspicion in their eyes. Today, the cowboy seemed to carry an unusual energy, a sort of certainty that made people hush in his presence. Naya went about her work quietly, arranging small baskets of herbs and vegetables for sale. Her hands moved quickly but carefully, weaving patterns into the baskets and ensuring that the bundles of herbs were neatly tied. She had worked this way for years, and the rhythm of her actions grounded her, offering a sense of calm amidst the murmur of the crowd. Then the cowboy spoke, his voice carrying easily across the market square. "Naya," he called, and for a moment she froze. He had used her name before, but always in quiet conversation. Now he said it publicly, as if making an announcement. "Yes," she replied cautiously, not looking up immediately, focusing on her work. "I've been thinking," he continued, his tone casual but firm, "that someone like you, strong and skilled, might be looking for family or children to care for." His eyes briefly met hers, but there was a strange mix of confidence and assumption in his gaze. Naya paused and looked up slowly, her heart tightening. She knew where this was heading. She had faced judgment before, quiet questions from neighbors, whispers behind her back, and subtle remarks about her life choices. But something about the way he spoke, in front of a crowd of villagers, carried weight she hadn't experienced before. It felt different, not just a question, but a declaration, one that dismissed everything she had done and valued in her life. I don't know what you mean," she said carefully, keeping her voice steady even as a flush of heat rose in her cheeks. She kept her hands busy, tying the final bundle of herbs, a small act of defiance against the sudden pressure. The cowboy smiled faintly, almost as if he thought he was making a light remark. "I mean," he said, raising his voice just enough for others to hear, "that a woman your age with no children, well, you've missed your chance. I already have mine." The words hung in the air, heavier than the heat of the midday sun. Naya felt as though time slowed. The market sounds, children laughing, merchants calling out prices, the clatter of baskets seemed to fade, leaving only the echo of his words. A sharp silence fell over the people nearby. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd, some sympathetic, some curious, and others judgmental. For a moment, Naya felt the familiar ache of years of subtle judgment, the weight of being seen only for what she did not have rather than the life she had built. Her stomach tightened, and her hands trembled ever so slightly, though she quickly steadied them. She could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, some unsure how to react, others quietly agreeing with his assumption. but Naya had learned resilience over the decades. She had faced countless moments where her choices were questioned, her worth measured in ways that ignored her strength, her knowledge, and her contributions. She knew she had two options: shrink in silence or hold her ground. Her heart pounded, but she drew in a slow breath, centering herself. "I may not have children," she said calmly, her voice clear and strong, "but I have lived a full life. I have cared for family, friends, and the land. I have learned, worked, and helped others. That is my worth." The cowboy raised an eyebrow as if surprised she dared to speak back. "Full life, without children?" he asked, shaking his head slightly, unable to comprehend her meaning immediately. "Yes," Naya said, lifting her chin. "My life is measured by what I do, what I give, and how I face challenges, not by what society thinks I should have. You may see things differently, but that does not make your opinion the measure of my value." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people nodded quietly, beginning to understand her strength. Others looked uneasy, realizing that they had also internalized the same narrow beliefs that the cowboy had expressed. Naya's words were firm, yet not angry. They were the words of someone who had lived long enough to know herself and refused to let anyone diminish her life. The cowboy paused, perhaps realizing that he had underestimated her. He had intended a casual remark, maybe even a tease, but it had met a wall of dignity and strength he had not expected. For a brief moment, there was a tension between them, a silent understanding that something significant had shifted. "You speak boldly," he said finally, his tone softer, almost reflective. "Most people wouldn't say that." "Most people," Naya replied, "also don't have to face the judgment they impose on others." She kept her gaze steady, refusing to be intimidated by his height, his confidence, or the eyes of the villagers. The crowd, sensing the shift in energy, began to relax. Some whispered in admiration, seeing a woman stand up not only for herself, but for all who had been quietly judged in the past. Others, perhaps less willing to confront their own assumptions, looked away, embarrassed by the sudden awareness of their biases. For Naya, the moment was both difficult and liberating. She had felt humiliation creeping over her, a shadow of old wounds and societal expectations. Yet in speaking her truth, she reclaimed a power that had always been hers. The market, the villagers, and even the cowboy had witnessed it, and though her heart still carried a flicker of pain, it was tempered by the knowledge that she had not let anyone define her life. The cowboy, now quieter, seemed to study her differently. His earlier casual confidence had shifted into something more thoughtful. Perhaps he realized that worth could not be measured by children or family alone, that a person's life contained depth and meaning far beyond surface assumptions. Naya sensed the change, though she did not let her guard down completely. She had learned that people could surprise you, sometimes in understanding, sometimes in stubbornness. After a few moments, he nodded once and stepped back, letting her space. The villagers resumed their activities slowly, some glancing her way with renewed respect. Naya returned to her work, arranging her baskets and herbs with the same calm she had always maintained. Her hands were steady, her movements precise, and her mind focused. She had faced the challenge, and though it had been uncomfortable, she had emerged with dignity intact. Later, when the market quieted and the sun began to dip toward the mountains, Naya sat by the river to wash her hands. The water flowed cool and steady, a mirror to her thoughts. She reflected on the day's events, the public remark, the crowd's reaction, and her own response. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and lingering unease, but mostly she felt clarity. She knew that no matter what others said, no matter how confident or casual their judgments, her life had value. That evening, Naya walked slowly through the village, observing the way the houses glowed with firelight and smoke rose from cooking pots. Children played near the riverbank, laughing freely, unaware of the tensions of the day. Adults spoke quietly, some discussing the events, others tending to their own tasks. Naya realized that the world was full of assumptions, judgments, and small cruelties, but also full of understanding, change, and the chance to teach others by example. She returned home, her steps calm and deliberate, carrying the knowledge that she had faced something difficult and had not been broken. She had been publicly challenged, publicly judged, yet she had responded with truth and strength. And though the cowboy remained part of her world, she knew that her worth was hers alone, not dependent on his opinion, the villagers' whispers, or society's expectations. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Naya sat by her window, looking out over the mountains and the river. She thought about the day, about courage, and about the quiet power of standing up for oneself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and the cowboy would still be present, but she felt ready. Her dignity, forged over 40 years of life, remained intact. And in that quiet confidence, she felt a deep and enduring strength that no words could diminish. The morning after the market incident, Naya woke with a heavy but determined heart. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the mountains in soft shades of pink and gold. She could hear the faint sounds of the village coming to life, roosters crowing, children calling to each other, and the gentle murmur of the river nearby. The world continued as always, indifferent to the trials of a single life, yet she felt a quiet sense of anticipation. Naya went about her morning routine with precision, carrying water from the river, tending her garden, and preparing breakfast. The physical labor grounded her, giving her a sense of control in a world that often seemed to judge her unfairly. She worked slowly and deliberately, savoring the warmth of the sun on her hands, the earthy scent of the soil, and the gentle sound of the flowing river. Each small task reminded her that she had agency over her life, even when others tried to define it. As she worked, her mind wandered to the events of the previous day. The cowboy's words had been sharp and public, aimed to belittle, but they had also sparked something within her. She realized that his assumptions were not about her reality, they were about his own worldview. He had measured her worth by his narrow standard, one that defined a woman's life by children and family. But Naya had spent 40 years building a life full of meaning in ways that went beyond such measures. She had learned patience, responsibility, and wisdom that could not be taken away by anyone's opinion. She remembered the faces of the villagers in the market, their reactions as the words hung in the air. Some had looked uncomfortable, others curious, and a few had begun to see the truth in her stance. That realization brought her a quiet satisfaction. The world often judged quickly, but moments like these had the power to shift perspectives. Naya understood that dignity was not about silence. It was about speaking truth when the time was right. By mid-morning, she had finished her work in the garden and decided to take a walk along the river. The path was familiar, winding between clusters of trees and patches of wildflowers. Birds sang in the branches, and the river sparkled in the sunlight. Naya's steps were slow and deliberate, her mind deep in thought. She reflected on her life, the years of learning, working, and helping others. She thought about her parents and grandparents, the lessons they had passed down, and the traditions she had vowed to preserve. As she walked, she realized that her sense of worth had always come from these quiet acts of care and dedication. The cowboy's words, while painful, could not erase decades of effort, compassion, and skill. She had been shaping her life with intention long before he arrived, and she would continue to do so long after. This thought brought a sense of calm and clarity, a reminder that her life was hers alone to define. She paused near a small grove of trees by the riverbank and sat on a flat rock, watching the water flow. The movement of the river reminded her that life, like water, continued forward, shaped by obstacles but never stopped. She thought about the moments of judgment she had faced over the years, the whispers of neighbors and the assumptions of strangers. Each had tested her, but each had also strengthened her. Naya realized that resilience was not about never feeling pain. It was about rising each time the world tried to push her down. The cowboy had challenged her, yes, but in doing so, he had also forced her to confront her own sense of self. She had seen clearly where she had allowed the opinions of others to linger, and she had chosen not to be swayed. In that moment, Naya understood something vital. True power did not come from proving others wrong, but from knowing one's own worth and living accordingly. As she reflected, she also considered the impact she had on others. Over the years, she had quietly supported friends, neighbors, and even strangers. She had taught children about the plants, the river, and the traditions of their people. She had offered advice, healed minor injuries, and provided comfort when it was needed most. These acts, though often unnoticed, had rippled outward, creating a web of influence and respect that no one could diminish. Naya felt a sense of gratitude for her life, for the people she had helped, and for the lessons she had learned. Gratitude, she realized, was a form of strength. It allowed her to see value in her experiences, even the painful ones, and to understand that her life had meaning beyond societal expectations. She made a silent promise to herself, to continue living fully, to continue learning, and to continue shaping her world with intention and care. Later in the day, she returned to the village center, not for work, but simply to observe. She noticed the subtle shifts in the villagers' behavior. Some smiled at her more openly, perhaps reflecting on her words in the market. Others went about their routines quietly, no longer as judgmental as before. Even the children, who had watched the scene unfold, treated her with a kind of respect that was not based on fear but on admiration. Naya recognized that change often came slowly, through quiet demonstration rather than loud confrontation. The cowboy appeared later that afternoon, as he often did, walking through the village with a purposeful stride. Naya noticed him but did not approach immediately. She watched from a distance, observing his movements, the way he interacted with the villagers, and the occasional glance he gave in her direction. There was a subtle shift in him as well. He seemed less certain, more reflective, as if he were beginning to understand that his assumptions about life, worth, and people might be incomplete. When their paths finally crossed, he nodded in acknowledgement. Naya returned the gesture, calm and composed. There was no need for words this time. The silent understanding between them carried weight. He had spoken boldly, she had responded with truth, and now both had the chance to consider the lessons embedded in their encounter. It was a moment of quiet mutual recognition, a pause in the tension that had defined their early interactions. Naya continued her walk, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She thought about the future, the tasks she had yet to complete, the knowledge she wanted to pass on, and the ways she could continue to contribute to her community. She understood that life would always present challenges, that there would always be people who questioned her choices or measured her worth unfairly. But she also knew that her strength came from within, and that no external judgment could erase the value she had cultivated over decades. In the evening, she returned home and prepared a simple meal. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft sounds of cooking and the distant river. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, reflecting on the day's events and considering how she would face tomorrow. She understood that resilience was a continuous practice, built moment by moment, decision by decision. And she was committed to that practice, not for the approval of others, but for the affirmation of her own spirit. Later that night, as stars dotted the sky and the village slept under a blanket of quiet darkness, Naya sat by her window, looking out over the mountains and the river. She reflected on the lessons of the past, the challenges of the present, and the possibilities of the future. She felt a profound connection to the land, to her ancestors, and to the life she had built. In that stillness, she realized that dignity was not given. It was claimed through actions, choices, and the unwavering commitment to remain true to oneself. Her mind returned to the cowboy, to the words he had spoken in the market, and to the crowd's reaction. She felt no anger now, only clarity. She understood that his remark had been a mirror, reflecting not her reality but his narrow view of the world. She also understood that by responding with calm and truth, she had not only preserved her dignity but also planted a seed of reflection in those who had witnessed it. Change, she thought, often began in small, quiet moments. Naya allowed herself a small smile. She had faced public judgment, internalized societal pressure, and emerged with her strength intact. She had learned that life's value could not be measured by the expectations of others, and that true power came from understanding one's own worth. As she sat in the quiet night, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had reclaimed not just her dignity, but her confidence in the life she had built. And so, Part 4 closed with Naya standing firm in her identity. She had faced humiliation, reflected on her experiences, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of her own power. She understood that the world would continue to present challenges, that assumptions would be made, and that judgments would still exist. But she also knew that she had the inner strength to navigate them with grace, courage, and dignity. The river flowed on, the mountain stood tall, and her life continued, rich with purpose, meaning, and the quiet power of self-knowledge. The morning air was crisp and clear, with sunlight streaming over the mountains, touching the village in gentle warmth. Naya woke early, as she always did, feeling a sense of calm determination. The events of the past days, the encounter in the market, the cowboy's assumptions, and her own reflections had left her with a quiet strength that radiated from within. She knew that today, like every day, would carry its challenges, but she also understood that she had the power to face them with dignity and courage. She rose from her simple bed and prepared for the day, carrying water from the river and tending to her garden. The rhythm of these familiar tasks grounded her, offering both comfort and clarity. Each movement, whether tying a bundle of herbs or smoothing the soil for new seeds, reminded her that life was built moment by moment, and that she had the ability to shape it with her own hands. The small victories, the growth of a plant, the careful arrangement of baskets, the gentle care of the animals, were proof of her worth, independent of anyone else's opinions. As she walked through the village later that morning, Naya noticed subtle changes. Some villagers greeted her with small smiles, a quiet acknowledgement of her resilience. Children waved or ran past, laughing, as if sensing her calm energy. Even a few adults who had once whispered or questioned her life choices now offered polite nods or gentle greetings. She understood that respect was often earned quietly, through consistent actions, and that her example had begun to influence those around her. The cowboy appeared soon after, riding slowly through the village. He dismounted near the river, where the children often played, and began speaking with the villagers, asking questions about local paths and trading goods. Naya observed him from a distance, her mind calm and clear. She noticed a change in him, a subtle humility, a quieter confidence than before. His eyes carried thoughtfulness now, rather than mere assumption. Perhaps the events of the market and her composed response had given him pause. Perhaps he was beginning to see that life, worth, and dignity were more complex than he had realized. Eventually, their paths crossed. The cowboy paused and nodded in greeting. Naya returned the gesture, steady and composed. There was no tension this time, only the quiet acknowledgement of two people who had met, clashed, and learned from one another. For a moment, they stood silently, each reflecting on the lessons of the past days. The river flowed nearby, constant and clear, as if to remind them that life moved forward, shaped by choices and actions, not by judgments alone. The cowboy spoke first. "Naya," he said, his voice softer than before, "I wanted to apologize. I spoke without understanding and my words were thoughtless." There was a sincerity in his tone, an honesty that caught her attention. He was not attempting to undermine her, nor to justify himself excessively. He simply acknowledged his mistake. Naya considered his words carefully. She had learned that forgiveness did not require warmth or affection. It required clarity and strength. "I appreciate your acknowledgement," she said calmly. "Words can hurt, but they can also teach. I hope you have learned that life and worth are not measured by narrow standards." The cowboy nodded slowly, as if taking in the full weight of her response. "I have," he admitted. "I have seen that there is more to a person's life than I realized. I judged quickly, but I was wrong." For Naya, the moment was significant, yet she felt no need to dwell on it. The acknowledgement was enough. She had reclaimed her dignity, faced judgment, and emerged stronger. She understood that the cowboy's reflection was his own journey, not her responsibility, but it mattered that he had begun to see the truth. The day continued, and Naya moved through her tasks with the same steady rhythm as always. She visited the small garden, checked on her baskets, and helped neighbors who needed her assistance. Each interaction, no matter how small, reinforced the life she had built, a life of care, skill, and quiet strength. She recognized that her value had never depended on anyone else's words. It had been present all along, nurtured through years of effort, patience, and resilience. By midday, the villagers began to gather near the market for a communal meeting, a regular event where news was shared and decisions were made. The cowboy joined them, but rather than dominating the conversation, he listened. Naya observed him, noting the subtle change in his demeanor. He asked questions respectfully, acknowledged others' knowledge, and avoided the assumptions that had marked his earlier presence. The villagers noticed too, and the mood shifted. Where there had once been curiosity mixed with judgment, there was now mutual respect and cautious understanding. Later, Naya found herself walking along the river again, this time with the cowboy nearby. They did not speak immediately, but the shared silence was not uncomfortable. The river flowed steadily, birds sang in the branches, and the wind rustled the leaves. After a few moments, the cowboy spoke. "I have traveled far," he said, "and I have met many people, but I have rarely met someone with such quiet strength. You have taught me more than I expected." Naya considered his words, recognizing the sincerity behind them. "Strength is not always loud," she replied gently. "It is in endurance, in choices, and in remaining true to oneself, even when the world tries to define you otherwise." The cowboy nodded thoughtfully, as if absorbing her message. There was a moment of mutual understanding, a silent agreement that the lessons of the past days would guide them both moving forward. For Naya, it was a confirmation of her own journey, the years of facing judgment, the quiet acts of care and skill, and the refusal to let anyone define her worth. She had lived her life fully, and in doing so, she had emerged resilient, respected, and dignified. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, Naya returned home. She tended her evening chores, prepared a simple meal, and sat quietly by the window, watching the mountains glow in the fading light. The village was calm, filled with the soft sounds of daily life winding down. She reflected on the days past, the challenge in the market, the quiet reflection, and the acknowledgement from the cowboy. Each had been a step in a journey that reaffirmed her understanding of life, dignity, and resilience. She thought about the children she had taught, the neighbors she had helped, and the traditions she had preserved. She understood that her impact on the world was real, even if it was subtle. She realized that the value of a life was not measured in appearances or assumptions, but in the strength, compassion, and purpose one carried. In that moment, Naya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The cowboy returned briefly before nightfall, seeking her out not to provoke, but to express gratitude for the lessons he had learned. "Thank you," he said simply, "for showing me that life is more than I thought, for teaching me respect, even when I did not earn it at first." Naya smiled quietly. "Respect is given by choice, not demand," she replied. It comes from understanding, reflection, and acknowledgement of truth. You have chosen well today." With that, he nodded, tipping his hat in farewell. The interaction was brief, yet profound. The tension, the assumptions, and the public embarrassment of the market were replaced by understanding, respect, and mutual acknowledgement. Naya had faced judgment, reclaimed her power, and quietly influenced not only him, but also the village that had witnessed the events. That night, as the stars appeared above the mountains, Naya reflected on the full circle of the experience. She had been publicly challenged, faced humiliation, and felt the weight of societal expectations. Yet, through reflection, resilience, and truth, she had emerged stronger. Her dignity was intact, her confidence restored, and her life reaffirmed in purpose and meaning. She realized that challenges would continue to come, that judgment and misunderstanding were part of the human experience, but so too were learning, growth, and acknowledgement. She understood that her strength came not from the absence of trials, but from her ability to face them with courage, wisdom, and grace. In the quiet of the night, she felt a profound connection to the land, her ancestors, and the people whose lives she had touched. Her life, rich in experience, care, and skill, stood as proof that value was not measured by narrow standards, but by the choices, resilience, and impact of one's actions. And so, Naya's story reached its resolution, not in loud victory or dramatic confrontation, but in quiet, enduring dignity. The cowboy had learned respect and humility, the villagers had witnessed courage and resilience, and Naya herself had reaffirmed her life's worth. Her journey, though filled with challenges, had brought clarity, understanding, and an unwavering sense of self. The river continued to flow, the mountains remained steadfast, and the village settled into the peaceful rhythm of night. Naya closed her eyes with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her life, defined by strength, wisdom, and quiet courage, would continue to matter, not for what she lacked, but for everything she had given and accomplished. Her dignity, restored and unshaken, became a guiding light, not just for herself, but for all who might witness her journey in the days to come.